business cycles.
Does your boss say things like, "We're all one big family here"? How should you think about your relationship with your employer? In the US, most employment is at will, meaning employers can terminate or modify employment for any reason and without notice, so long as it's not illegal. The US work week is 40 hours per the Fair Labor Standards Act. Only non-exempt employees, and most mid to high level workers do not fall in this category, are entitled to overtime pay. Unionized workers may have more protection, but union membership has declined by half since the early 80s. It's about 10% today. The US is the only country in the G8 countries, and yes, this includes Russia, which has both at-will labor laws as well as little to no national social safety nets. This double jeopardy puts American workers at high risk since most health insurance and retirement plans are provided by US employers. Without national health care and pension schemes, there is significant variability in the quality of coverage and benefits Americans receive. It also means that should you be fired from your job, you will have to self-fund you and your dependents' health insurance. If you can't afford it, you may consider risking foregoing health benefits, including important preventative health services, a notable risk which could be financially devastating should serious illness or injury occur. This, in its plainest, most blunt terms, is a summary of the relationship between you and your employer. You are hired for an agreed amount of money based on a point-in-time job description for a point-in-time boss and a point-in-time department or team. Unless you have a unique employment contract, your employer may legally modify any and all of these things. Make no mistake, especially in the United States, work is not family. Woo, this is heavy stuff. I'm gonna grab a coffee. Hang tight, we'll be right back.
So early in my career as a field sales rep, which meant I spent my days traveling solo in my territory, my employer did a massive team building trip where they brought us all together at Disney in Florida. We ran a 5K together. We had Coach K speak about successful teams, spent time in breakout sessions, learning from each other and bonding. We all became really close. Then, 2 months later, the entire team, except for me and 2 other people, were laid off because the company lost an important contract. It was nothing that anyone had done wrong or was related to their performance. Just everyone got laid off except for 3 of us. And something that stuck with me was one of my remaining colleagues had said, "Well, they said we're a family, but this feels like coming into the kitchen for breakfast and asking, 'Where's Mikey? Where's Amy?' And being told, 'Look, your brothers and sisters are no longer part of the family, but we're still a family.'" So now I want to be transparent in this discussion and implicate myself. In the past, a combination of my own limited self-awareness around my own needs and the outsized role that work was playing in my life greatly influenced how I approach team dynamics and cohesion. I've been building teams for nearly 2 decades, and my vantage point on this, it has evolved, but I was often the overprotective, fighting battles instead of letting my team build their capabilities. And this overprotection would evaporate as soon as I left, leaving the team without the strength they needed to advocate for themselves. It took me a long time to understand what I'd been doing and why this was not good for my direct reports. There was also a familiarity and warmth that served my sensibilities, but didn't necessarily foster the independence and resilience my teams needed. My instinct for Understanding how to influence team cohesion to improve commitment and performance often led me to inadvertently stifle their growth or even push them too hard. So, as we discuss these themes today, I want to emphasize the importance of self-awareness and balance in leadership. It's also finding that sweet spot where you can guide and support your team without overshadowing their development and doing it without creating dependency.
Wow. A lot of what you've said is resonating with me, and I have a couple thoughts. I think I want to start by saying one of the things I've seen, particularly in large corporate environments, is the projecting of a family model onto employees, by well-meaning or potentially not well-meaning people. I think I have two examples of those. In the latter category, one of the executives I coached described a former boss who literally referred to herself as Mama Bear to her large team. And this was in a very large firm. This is not a small friendly environment. This is over 100,000 people. This woman
Wow.
had a habit of referring to her male directs as her sons, which I found particularly creepy, and obviously just plainly unprofessional. And this was not done in private. This was a regular occurrence. Exchanges would happen in person in large Zoom meetings, even in town hall meetings, which meant several hundred employees on the line. So you won't be surprised that this dynamic came with lots of confusing politics to navigate. My client complained about how her boss chose to play mommy only with her male directs, whom she favored over the two female direct reports. And by the way, all of this is happening at a time when the firm is going through restructuring and reducing headcount. So it really amped up the competition within the leadership team. This bizarre pseudo-family model constructed by this boss was completely intentional. And she benefited in playing off the insecurity that she created in her team, creating power struggles amongst the work siblings. So like as I was hearing this story, my thought was like, this boss is not just professionally toxic, but if her flavor of mother archetype includes pitting her children against each other to gain mommy's favor, or worse, to avoid her wrath, then this is a double whammy and a psychologically toxic person. While I don't remember referring to any of my teams as a family, and I'm sure someone will remind me if that's not true, earlier in my career, I did tend to make caretaking a part of my management style. I don't think I did this to seek favor or loyalty from my team, though in some cases I did receive both. I think I did this because I believed that I was responsible for my employees' success, safety, and emotional well-being. Now, I've spent my career focusing on transformation, and change can be an emotionally difficult thing for people to cope with, even those designing and executing it. Looking back, I can see that I was trying to emotionally take care of my employees. This may sound nice, but looking back with the advantage of time, I realize it's a risky model for everyone involved. The simple reason is the obvious one. Bosses aren't parents, and employees are not children. While empathy, kindness, and consideration are good leadership qualities, they really need to be balanced with objectivity, professional boundaries, and emotional distance. If you don't do this, you run the risk of instilling in yourself and your employees an unrealistic expectation that they will be looked after and protected. Unless you're the CEO of a company, most likely you are not in a position to promise anything of the sort. There are always going to be things beyond your control. In my case, especially in some of the more complex work cultures I've been in, I liked the idea of my employees feeling safe. And I also liked the idea of them seeing me as the reason why they were safe. And when things were quiet and cool, this can be lovely until it isn't. Particularly in large organizations where structural reorganizations are very common, the fantasy eventually hits reality. There comes a time when maybe a decision is made above you or an issue arises which is beyond your ability to address. When I was just starting out as a manager, I had an employee with a serious health condition. I worried about her and fussed over her health. Several months after working for me, she began making mistakes and wasn't always following directions I'd given her. On one occasion, she completely ignored a direct request and instead did an assignment the way she wanted to, instead of the way I specifically asked her to do it. Instead of discussing it with me in advance, she took liberties which I don't believe she would have done if we had maintained more professional emotional boundaries. It wasn't that either one of us were wrong, rather that we were each bringing personal stuff, mostly subconscious, to our relationship, and we were both letting it play itself out there. Psychologists call this enactment. It's what happens when we unconsciously repeat behaviors, usually from childhood. This dance between two people can play itself out, usually without either person realizing what's happening. And this is a key reason why I'm a big advocate of professional personas and boundaries. Like the expression, fences make good neighbors, professional boundaries make good colleagues. It creates clear, conscious expectations that all parties can navigate. It won't eliminate transferential issues amongst coworkers, but it will be a helpful factor in keeping things from getting very messy. Another reason why taking on a parental role with employees is a bad idea is the fact that some people may experience you very unfavorably. Some employees may have histories which make this kind of dynamic feel uncomfortable, either because they've had a boss who did this in a manipulative way, or maybe there are more complex reasons related to childhood experiences. Despite your positive intentions, acting like a mother or father figure to your employees may make you feel better, but your employees may experience you as unsafe. The workplace is fraught with political and interpersonal complexity. The moment you step out of the professional work frame, you open yourself up to disappointment, resentment, and even political or labor-related risk. This is especially true in toxic, dog-eat-dog cultures. Losing emotional perspective at work will make playing the game much more psychologically challenging for you, and also distract you from your primary directive, which is just to do the work.
Wow. So, talk about being back in the saddle. Listening to you always evokes insight. And one of the thoughts that came up when you were talking was that good fences make good neighbors. This kind of dovetails in something else that you said, which was that you're making promises that you can't be assured that you can keep. When we were preparing for this, I was surprised. And I don't know why I was. I was surprised by how similar our experiences and perspectives were. My blind spot has been that I worked a lot and was using professional relationships to fulfill the need for connection that my workaholism was crowding out of in my personal life. I didn't see it. In fact, I was under the mistaken belief that my ability to focus on work at the expense of personal connections was evidence that personal connection wasn't necessary for me the same way it was for others. So irony alert here is I created a workshop for business development and sales for uncovering the drivers and motivations of your customers. And the way it works is that we look at many different drivers, own our own drivers and motivations, and come to understand that everyone has different motivations unique to their constitution. And the first revelation in the workshop is uncovering the projection and bias of believing everyone is driven by the same thing, specifically what we consider important. The second revelation is understanding the difference between what we think is driving our behavior and what actually is. Because if someone on the opposite side of the table can clock you and you're unaware, they can gain the advantage and ultimately move you around the board with ease, and you'll be left wondering what happened. So the irony here is that I uncovered my driver through teaching the workshop. It's a common projection for salespeople to believe the drive for everyone is to make money. Here's a sampling of other drivers, like avoiding risk, conserving time, building human connection, gaining status, securing resources, which includes making money, but not exclusive to it, and an innate desire to be generous, the desire for meeting. And I had an oh my gosh moment when I pinned human connection as the reason I've been staying with companies longer than was good for me. At first, I had blamed it on the money. Then I had a flash of insight, and like a movie montage, I could see this thread stretching back to the creation of my first team that was relying on these human connections to fulfill me. It also showed up when I was negotiating an investment deal, and I noticed that I was having a hard time resisting the uncharacteristic warmth and familiarity of the other party, and how this was making it hard for me to say no at times when I needed to.
Business cycles. Yeah. The business cycles.